Okay, so an allergy is one time the body does stuff that doesn't make sense. You got me? So this is an exaggerated immune response. It's overreacting to something that it shouldn't overreact to. So let me give you the example. See, this is your nose, and it's a little nostril right there. And it's nice out, so pollen's in the air. Pollen is an antigen. It's not you, right? So floating around in your blood and lymphatic system, you have those programmed cells called B cells, right? And I only did 2 of them, but there's millions and millions of different types of B cells. And each type of B cell is going to have a specific receptor on it that will allow a specific antigen to interact with it. So when you're exposed to pollen, there are specific B cells that will match up with that pollen. And when they do that, right, they're going to match up receptors on the B cell. And then that B cell is going to get turned on. And that B cell gets turned on into plasma cells, which secrete specific antibodies, and then memory cells. And those memory cells allow you to produce antibodies much quicker than the first time you're being exposed to it, and at a much greater rate, like times tens or thousands times more. So in B cells, these lymphocytes, it is the antibodies that will destroy the antigen. In this case, it's pollen. So those antibodies will get circulated into the blood, right? And come on in. Come on in. So the white blood cells that are floating around in your blood will know that I got to kill that, and they'll eat it and get rid of it. Now, in people with an allergy, there's an extra step, all right? So in people with allergies, the same thing happens, but the extra step is this. When those B cells come in contact with the pollen, they're going to divide into plasma and memory cells, and then the plasma cells are going to begin to produce these antibodies. But the extra step is this. These specific antibodies bind themselves to a cell of the immune system called a mast cell. And mast cells contain histamine. And histamines, when they're released from mast cells, cause massive arterial vasodilation, and they cause the capillaries that are supplying that area to become leaky. So where did the pollen enter? It entered in your nose. But you have an allergy to it. So now, those antibodies that are attached to mast cells, they're going to still circulate in the blood, and they're going to attack that pollen and try to get rid of it. But when those antibodies bind to that pollen, these antibodies being connected with the mast cell, it's going to cause the mast cell to release histamine. And what's it going to do to the arteries? It's going to cause the arteries in your nose and your eyes to dilate. So what's going to happen? You're going to get a stuffy nose. And your eyes are going to begin to water, and your eyelids are going to get puffy, right? And it's also going to cause little holes to be placed in the capillary. So the plasma from the blood is going to leak out of the capillary, and that's going to cause your nose to become runny. So this is the important piece, and this is really important to understand how the immune system works. Remember, on your first exposure to something, you don't make a lot of antibodies. So you may not even know that you're allergic to something until the second exposure. On the second exposure, you have these memory cells lying in wait, and instead of making, I'm making this up again, instead of making 1,000 antibodies on the first exposure, first time you're exposed to it, on your second exposure, because of those memory cells, you make 10 million antibodies, right? So the antibody response the second time you're exposed to something is much greater. So, but the same thing that is going to happen. So all of those antibodies that were formed the second time you were exposed to it, they're going to bind to mast cells, and they're going to go to that area, right? But this time those antibodies are bound to mast cells, and you got a ton of them, so you're going to get even more dilation and more runniness, so you will get the allergic reaction. Say yeah. Now, you take an antihistamine, because what antihistamines do, antihistamines, hang on, I got to find a good color for this. I'm going to use this. Antihistamines they prevent the mast cell from releasing more histamines. So all they do is prevent the further release of the histamine from the mast cell. But you already had histamines released, right? What did they cause? They caused massive arterial vasodilation and increased capillary leakiness. So what they will do to combat the stuffiness, they will give you a decongestant, and that decongestant is Sudafed, or fake epinephrine, pseudoephedrine. And pseudoephedrine causes all arteries of your body to constrict, especially the ones in your nose. That's why people with high blood pressure are told to avoid Sudafed. Say yeah. That's